my name is Polly Jean Harrison and we are here at Fintech Week London. Would you like to introduce yourself for us, please?
Yeah, hi, my name is Prakash Pattni and I'm the Managing Director for IBM Cloud for Financial Services.
Fantastic. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about IBM and the kind of things that you do there?
So IBM is a very different company, I think, today to maybe what people have traditionally thought about. So the areas that we're really focused on are hybrid cloud, artificial intelligence, and we're one of the biggest research organizations in the world. So quantum computing is another area of focus, but also we have a large consulting and software arm. So a very diverse organization, broadly focusing on many areas that I think are emerging technologies today.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know you have a lot of various different partnerships with different people and you facilitate various different partnerships with different companies as well. Why is partnership and collaboration important in this industry?
I think that everyone has different strengths and something different to bring to the partnership. And at IBM, one of the things that we've been really focused on is around that collaboration. So within financial services, for example, one of the things we set up was a financial services council exactly for that point, where we bring together fintechs, regulators, the banking industry to understand what the key problems are and how we can all work together to solve them. So that's a really good example, I think, of where IBM's leverage these partnerships to drive collaboration and to bring the best of everyone together to solve common problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you act as like a trusted partner as well between banks and startups. What's the value of having that for both on the bank side and then the startup side as well?
Yeah, and I think on the banking side, banks really want to work with startups and fintechs, but they've often found that it's hard to onboard them because the fintechs don't always understand all the complex regulations, compliance, security side of things. And from a fintech point of view, it can really slow things down because they're having to go through these cycles of, how do the bank finds an issue, they have to fix it, go back, test it again, which is the right thing to do. The bank doesn't want to increase risk. And where we've been able to really help them has been the bank comes to us and goes, look, can you help the startup or the software provider? And we've worked with the software provider, help them build in a way that is secure and safe. So the bank gets the advantage of being able to onboard them faster, and the fintech's able to get through the sales cycle faster. So rather than having to spend months or years going through and onboarding, they can do that in a matter of weeks. So everyone sort of wins, right? The bank gets innovation, the startup gets to revenue faster.
Yeah, fantastic. And sort of think about the innovation, I guess. I'd love to talk to you about AI, because I feel like everyone's talking about AI at the moment, right? I'd love to get your perspective on it and what the industry looks like at the moment.
So we've been working on AI for a long time. And I think it's going through one of these hype cycles, a bit like, I think they call it the Netscape moment when the internet first came about, and then everyone started to see the potential and started to adopt it. I think we're having one of those periods. But there's a saying that I think was quite interesting. It's not mine, but I thought it was quite resonant. They said, in the short term, people overestimate the impact of these things, but underestimate the long-term impact. And I think AI is having that moment where people are starting to wake up to this was going to be transformative and have a real impact on society and how we work. But I think maybe some of the reactions, going both ways in terms of what it could mean. For us, it's really been about how do we build a product that, today's AI has been built on massive data sets. And the reason they've suddenly become very effective is because in the past you had to curate this data, label it all, and all that took a lot of time. Whereas today you can just feed massive amounts of text, data, speech, etc., videos into it, and it will interpret this. So the foundation models have come a long way. But what that also means is it's looked at everything on the internet, right? And there's fake news and data as well as good news. So you hear about sometimes some of these models are what they call hallucinating, right? They're making stuff up. And I think that's the risk. So what we've been focused on is really how do we make these models ethical and have really strong governance, so they're picking the right data and controlling it in the right way and giving you transparency and avoiding bias. So yes, I think AI is having its moment, but I also think there's a lot of work still to be done to make sure it can be harnessed and used in a safe and secure way.
And I guess a lot of the buzz that we're seeing at the moment is very much from a consumer side of things, I think. But where does the banks come into play? Are banks keen to take on AI, or is there a bit more hesitancy because of the risk that it does impose?
So we were actually talking to a number of banks a couple of weeks back about this, and I think they're very conservative about adopting it, partly because once you give it access to your data, it's absorbed your data, right? So that's one of their intellectual property areas, right? It's like, their customer data is very private, and gives them a lot of information. So they've been quite hesitant about that, number one. And two, banks are all about trust. So if the AI starts making stuff up, again, that's going to impact trust. So I think banks have been very conservative, rightly so. And so we were at a forum last week with the UK government, and we had a couple of banks on there. And that was the thing they were talking about, was how do I guarantee that there's no bias? So if I suddenly start using this to make decisions on who should get a loan or a mortgage, how can I ensure there's transparency? So if the regulator came to me and said, why did you make that decision? Is it fair? Are you biasing against one type of person or another? How are you able to do that? And I think that's the area that we've really got to focus on if we're to really adopt these technologies in a safe and secure way. And say that's the area that we've really been focused on, is how do we make sure we remove that bias? How do we ensure transparency and explainability about what's going on?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess, what do you think is coming next? When we think about the future, you mentioned just before about short-term and long-term. What is the future of AI? How is it going to evolve, perhaps, I don't know, over the next year or so?
I think it's hard to tell. So I always remind people about, if you look back to the beginning of the 20th century, when there were lots of new technologies coming to the fore, like electricity and locomotives and things like that. At the time, 50% of the population was engaged in some form of agriculture. And today it's 2%, but we don't have 48% of the population unemployed, right? And things like restaurants and people eating out didn't really exist, and leisure facilities. So, that's what grew. Those industries grew off the back of that. So I think it's the same with AI. I think it's hard to tell what all the impacts are going to be. But the areas that we're seeing it's being embedded in things like coding, for developers. We're embedding it into a carbon calculator. So I think it'll have a real positive impact in areas of ESG and productivity for people. So I think, as I said, still early stages. People haven't quite worked out some of the where this is going to go. But I think it will be transformative, and I think it will be positive on the whole. I think new types of roles will evolve as we move forward.
Fantastic. And then what's next for IBM? What have you got on your roadmap?
So we've got a really important roadmap around quantum. So I think when you combine these two technologies, you're going to be able to do some amazing things. So today, classical computers are limited somewhat because just of the compute power you need to do, to address some of the things like, when you're looking for new drugs, for example, and antibiotics, or looking at how do you improve fertilizer productivity or fraud detection, things like that. Some of the constraints have been around the amount of compute power you need to do that. So with quantum, I think that's going to help leapfrog that and move you forward. Now, combine that with artificial intelligence and all these foundational models, you get a really powerful combination. So for us, we have a roadmap around quantum and how that's going to develop, and we've hit all of our milestones. And I think that's becoming, in the short term, going to become very, a lot of banks are already looking at ways of applying it. So I think the commercial viability is rapidly evolving. And similarly with AI, I think when you start combining these technologies, you're going to see some really interesting things start to happen. And Rishi Sunak mentioned that last week at London Tech Week, for example. He was talking about both of these technologies being transformative. So I think those are some of the things you're going to start to see. And these are both areas we've worked on and been focused on for decades.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to chat.
You too. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.